The scripture today is Mark 8:31 through 38. And this is, in some ways, one of those passages that kind of goes over our head because it's familiar about Jesus has just said that Peter has just said Jesus is the Messiah, and Jesus then starts talking about the cross, and the disciples really want to push back on that. The cross is one of those things that is just sort of like in the background, and we don't really, in some ways, think so much about our interpretation of it versus what the cross would have symbolized to the people in Jesus' time. For instance, Jesus was not the only person crucified on a cross. Like tens of thousands of people were crucified. It was the common way of putting people to death, especially the poor. And it was a humiliating, shameful way of dying. You would have been hung on a cross. And as you can see from all the images in Gaza, how quickly in the Middle East people want to bury a body. But instead, often the body would be on the cross and it would be picked to death by animals. And so it was a really shameful, humiliating thing. And so to talk about dying on a cross like that was something that the disciples really didn't want any part of. They didn't want to, they were, all over, this ruler who would come on a mighty horse and set them free and overthrow Rome. And so they're pushing back on that. They're pushing back on that vulnerability of that image. Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Jesus called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life?"